Hi everybody, thank you for listening to episode 8 of Private Listed. I'm calling it The Cultural Edge, and the topic is raising capital in the markets of Asia. I'm going to share my 20 plus years of living and working in the region and how I learnt the machinations and the important parts of raising both institutional capital and private capital across what's a vast region. If you're a founder or an asset manager looking to raise capital, I hope you get something out of this episode. I'll start with institutional capital. I went up there in the early 2000s to live in Hong Kong and work for major global investment banks. I'd been traveling to the region. I'd been traveling to Singapore frequently. I'd built relationships with government officials, semi-government officials, sovereign wealth managers, senior banking executives, and they had me into their homes for meals. I played golf with them. I'd built quite a bit of trust. I wasn't living there, but they all got to know me and we'd all get to socialise together. So when I went up there, it was a little bit easier. But I wasn't one of them. I was a foreigner who travelled there quite often. I then moved up to Hong Kong in the early 2000s as part of a team. We were doing structured finance projects. We were essentially structuring transactions and bringing asset managers out from the United States and Europe, first class, first tier asset managers, to roadshow them around Asia. And this was most of the large economies in Asia, so Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, India, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and even Australia, New Zealand. What I learnt very quickly from starting to live there was I'd been into these countries. I'd run a business in Japan earlier, but I'd been into these countries often, and now I'm going in to see asset managers. And in these rooms are 4 white walls, a table, and then a person sitting there that's going to interview you. Historically, European and North American asset managers had done these deals amongst themselves. They didn't need anybody in Asia to contribute anything. If there was any contribution, it was the tail end of the dog. Most of the deal, 95% of the deal, was done in those regions that I mentioned. That all changed in the early 2000s. Asia just became the lead ticket on numerous transactions. And it evolved, but it evolved pretty quickly. And the asset managers in Europe and North America had already been managing an awful lot of money and had quite a lot of concentration risk in that part of the world. So it was a natural diversification. But like all people, they thought that a handshake, a spreadsheet, good legal and compliance was enough to get a deal over the line. Handshakes don't mean that in Asia. They're a bit more so now, but the handshakes didn't mean we're a done deal. In Australia or New Zealand or Europe, you handshake and the deal's done. That's just how it was done when I was growing up. I'm older now. But it means very different things in every Asian country. It means a different thing. How you market something on television or in person is very different in Taiwan as it is in Hong Kong. Some countries don't want cold calls, they'll just hang up on you. Most places don't, but a lot of places don't want you to cold call them. And they prefer an ad on a TV. I would interview, we're in a fortunate position that we brought first-class asset managers out to Asia. We did some award-winning deals, and we lead managed a number of deals. I was fortunate to be involved in that, and I was fortunate to lead some of these teams. But I always interviewed the asset managers well in advance. And I said to them, when you come out here, we're going to take you around Japan and Korea, and you're going to go to some pretty punchy meetings, but you won't know what the outcome is. You will certainly get asked about 200 questions. And then the person interviewing you will say, why do you think you're better as an asset manager than anybody else? It's quite a confronting question because they've all got egos and they all think they're better. So they've got to talk about their track records and whatever. But what's behind that question is that there are 4 or 5 other investment banks taking tier 1 asset managers sitting outside the door ready to do their presentation. And I was because of our track record, I was in a position to be able to explain to these people, this is not North America or Europe, this is stark meeting rooms. You will not know the outcome, but if you answer the 200 questions and you come across as genuine, you might get 0 or you might get a $50 million investment. But here's the key to how you get these meetings in the first place. It's taking a person that lives and works there on the ground. So I learned very early that I would go to all the offices in these countries, again, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, and I would work with the people that lived and worked in the countries, with the central banks, the asset managers, the insurance companies, the sovereign wealth funds, all of the above. But the people on the desks in those countries were locals. I was not a local. I flew in and flew out, and certainly the asset managers that we took were not locals. But by taking somebody that can validate and verify who you are and who's in the room, it made a huge difference. In the end, I travelled to these countries so much on my own that I became credible enough to go to these meetings. But I still always took somebody in the team, in the office, in the country that I was visiting, because the job was to make them sensible. They've got to live there when I leave. And so it's trust. They would go into bars at nights and drink and have meals, and their families mix. It's the same in any country. But they're the ones where after you leave the meeting, the asset manager, insurance company, the sovereign wealth fund, they will then call the local person on the desk and they say, is it so-and-so good at whatever? And I've got another 10 questions that I want to answer. Can you go and get them? So that's how that bond works. And then the person on the desk would call us in Hong Kong, who were originating and running the transaction, and they'd ask us on behalf of the client all these questions. The more questions you got, the more likely you were to get a ticket. If you didn't get a whole lot of questions, it wasn't headed in the right directions. But the more questions you got through your connection, the better. Because we're a product group. But I'd learnt that a nod and a smile and a handshake doesn't mean, yes, you're getting a $20 million ticket. And thank you for coming. But they're always polite in every country. So that's the changing landscape and where it happened. And then I was fortunate to be asked to go to a lunch a few years after I'd been in Hong Kong with a neighbour, a very senior executive from one of Asia's major economies. We got on well, but he took me to lunch to explain something. I sort of knew. I knew it anyway, but he put it in crystal clear terms because he was from one of the countries. And he said, country A is huge, and when you take a deal to them, they sit around a table and a consensus is sort of reached, but it gets passed up the line to a higher level. And then it gets passed up to a higher level, and it gets passed up to a higher level, and ultimately one person will make a decision at the end of the journey up the tree. And I knew this. I'm not going to say what the countries are, but you can work them out yourself. And so that's how a deal would go. People would smile, people would be expressionless, you'd pitch your story, then you'd leave. That's how that one worked. And then he said, now I'll talk to you about my country. We all go to school together. Our wives all know each other. Our kids all play together, and we see each other on weekends. But on Tuesday, when we go into a meeting room and there's a transaction on the table that involves money or investment, one of us will just break ranks and put our hand out and go, that's mine. And the stark contrast is exactly how these two economies work and investment theses work. And I knew it, and I've never forgotten it. And I was a privilege to be told it by somebody from one of those countries. I then moved on to raising private capital across a lot of industries, across consumer fashion, FMCG, healthcare, digital technology, industrial manufacturing, pitches, and pitches. Lucky I was in a position to be able to vet and do my own due diligence before allowing them to present. So I'd let them come up. I'd let them come up and pitch and present. I'd introduce them to people that I thought were potential investors in their sector. That is never a phone book. That is usually something on your right hand or maybe your left and right hand, but it's never much more than that. So I would diligise that and then would go off and have those meetings. And I could manage those meetings quite easily. There were others where I would attend the lunch where somebody had come up with an early stage business to present their vision, their thesis, their early stage business. But what used to get me is they book 5-star hotels. They'd fly up in business class and they'd have these lunches in 5- and 6-star hotels looking to show how good they were. And I'm sitting there thinking almost always, you should be in the back of the aeroplane in economy and you should be staying in a really cheap hotel. You're asking people to give you money to grow and scale your business, and you're spending the proceeds on business and first class airfares and on 5- and 6-star luncheons, hotel luncheons? No. And I saw these, rarely worked. But at the end of these lunches, when they did their presentations, there'd be questions from people. But the first thing that the pitcher would say when the lunch was finished, they'd go up to the local and they'd say, how did I do? How am I going? And then the local would give them feedback on what they did. Invariably, the local people that were bringing the deal to the table were probably getting paid a fee, so I understand that. I just personally didn't like the business class and the 6-star hotel presentations on raising early stage capital. So in Asia, a lot is whether it's a private transaction or an institutional transaction, people want to know who's in the deal. In most countries in the world, people want to know that Pension Fund A and Pension Fund B, Superannuation Fund A, they're in, and that helps. In Asia, it's really important. And in Hong Kong, where I lived and worked and travelled from, every Sunday I would go into the office and go to one of these countries that I've mentioned, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Singapore, China. I always travelled on a Sunday. Family didn't necessarily like it, but that's how I got started. And I'd do that. But always when you're in these meetings, the person is just going, okay, I know that you've lived here long enough. You know the people down the road. You know the people here. You know, are they going to invest in the deal? You had to give an honest answer. In my whole life, from running sales and marketing business when I was young and working on the futures floor in an open outcry market, you just learn that trust is everything. People will only deal with you when they feel comfortable. And in Asia, it's more important than anything that they feel that you are telling the truth. And you get a reputation where you are telling the truth. Or you're not telling the truth, and then people won't deal with you. But people take comfort when they do their background, go to an Asian country, work with a local, give the local face. Because ultimately, the local person is the one that's going to help you scale or transition your company. If you're a baby boomer trying to sell your company, you can look up a phone book or you can look up any chamber of commerce and go, can you take me to this, that or the other? And they can, but they're not real relationships. You actually need to communicate and meet people that are involved in the fabric of the country that you're dealing with. And then when you go to a meeting, it doesn't mean that you will get an investment, but you're more likely to get a hearing that will potentially lead to an investment. I also want to conclude by sharing this. It's a McKinsey article that I read a couple of years ago. It might be worth keeping in mind that according to McKinsey, Asian consumers are expected to account for half of the global consumption and growth in the decade from, it was 2021 then, $10 trillion opportunity. And now, globally, 1 of every 2 upper middle income and above households is expected to be in Asia, and 1 in every 2 consumer transactions is likely to occur in the region. I know this, and you all know it, and you all live it every day. But my message is trust. My message is in the end, I became the trusted local, but I was fortunate to do that. Not everyone can become the trusted local, so it's important that you do your due diligence and find out who is best placed to take you to to investors or strategic partners to help you scale, transition, or exit. Very different cultures, but very exciting cultures. Thank you for listening to this episode 8. You can get me on heyjamie@privatelisted.com, and I'm enjoying listening using my new Rode NT microphone today on this episode, so I hope it's a bit clearer. Thank you very much.